When I'm writing, I don't think about actors. I try not to think about casting and really just write the characters as best I can, and particularly with a true story. Then when I was done, I'm looking at the cover of American Prometheus with Oppenheimer with this intense blue-eyed stare, and I don't know, at some point I'm like, I know who can do that.
He called me out of the blue, as he always does, or rather Emma called me, because Chris doesn't have a phone, and she passed me the phone, and we talked. So my initial reaction, of course, it was like euphoric, and
It's kind of scary actually. And then we drove up to the set they'd started to build, and everything was just flat, and all the portaloos had fallen over. There's blue ice everywhere. It was disgusting. Even in those conditions where you could barely drive a stake in the ground, somehow they got it done similar time of year and a similar time frame as the real Los Alamos got built. And so for me and the crew, it was just this great adventure of really starting to relate to what, this tiny taste of what the real Manhattan Project people went through.
Hey everyone, I never got a chance to post this incredible conversation between two masters, Christopher Nolan and Cillian Murphy, an in-depth talk about Oppenheimer. This is before Oppenheimer won Oscars for Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actor for Cillian Murphy. You'll hear great behind-the-scenes stories like the surprising place Christopher Nolan first heard about Oppenheimer, why Christopher Nolan was so compelled to make this masterpiece, and how they accomplished the incredible task of creating Los Alamos. This is an insightful conversation between two geniuses. Hope you enjoy it, and if you do, make sure to follow and subscribe and help support the channel.
Congratulations to both of you on just the richly deserved success of this movie. It's a special honor to be speaking with both of you tonight, to have both of you tonight, because Oppenheimer is, among other things, such an extraordinary culmination of your years-long working relationship, going back nearly 20 years and 5 previous movies. And Chris, I know you had long wanted to make a film about J. Robert Oppenheimer, and at what point, can you talk about why, and at what point did you realize that Cillian was perfect to play him?
I've always been interested in Oppenheimer as a sort of seminal figure in this enormous change that happened in the world. And growing up in the United Kingdom in the 1980s, there was a lot of fear around nuclear weapons at that time. In the early 80s, the Americans were staging cruise missiles at Greenham Common, and there were tremendous protests around that. So it was something that those of us who were 12, 13, 14 in that era, we were seeing argument and concern around that issue on a nightly basis, and it was very much in the pop culture. There were, remember they animated the movie When the Wind Blows, the Raymond Briggs book that came out. David Bowie had a song on it, but it was all about what ordinary people would do under the eventuality of nuclear Armageddon. And somewhere in all this, Sting had this song called Russians, and one of the lyrics referred to Oppenheimer. It talked about nuclear weapons as Oppenheimer's deadly toys. And that was probably the first time I heard the name. And so over the years, I'd sort of become more and more aware of the specifics of his story. But like a lot of people, I didn't know exactly what had happened to him. I knew that he was known as the father of the atomic bomb, and then had some kind of complications to do with the government, this kind of thing, and communism. What I got a hold of that stuck with me was this story that he and the other scientists on the Manhattan Project, coming up to the Trinity test, could not completely eliminate to their satisfaction the possibility of atmospheric ignition, destroying all life. But they went ahead and pushed the button. And that, to me, just seemed as dramatic a thing as I've ever heard. I put it in Tenet as a reference to that in that film. As a rap gift on Tenet, Rob Pattinson, who's in that film, gave me a book of Oppenheimer's speeches from the 1950s, where you see him wrestling with how the world should manage this change that they brought about. And it was pretty terrifying, pretty sobering to read that sort of immediacy when nuclear weapons were new. What did people think? How did they think they were going to be able to control that? And then all of that culminated in Chuck Roven, who Emma and I had produced the Dark Knight trilogy with, getting me to read American Prometheus. And that book by Kai Bird and Martin Sherwood just had it all in there, and I was hooked, really on my first read. As Cillian's very aware, and I've made him aware over the years, when I'm writing, I don't think about actors. I try not to think about casting and really just write the characters as best I can. And particularly with a true story, with real people, you've got so much reference. You've got the real people at your fingertips, as it were. Then when I was done, I'm looking at the cover of American Prometheus with Oppenheimer with this intense blue-eyed stare, and I don't know, at some point I'm like, I know who can do that. And Cillian, we've known each other for 20 years, as you say, and anytime there's something I think that this guy can do or is right for, because he can do anything, but if it really clicks with me, I would love to work with him. It's so much fun. And it was really fun to be able to call him this time and say, yeah, but this time you're at the center.
Cillian, you have played such a range of roles in Chris's films over the years, and were a master of terror in the Dark Knight movies, and you showed us what terror looked like from the inside in Dunkirk, and you made a very poignant and memorable mark in Inception. But what was your response when he told you he wanted to put you at the center and playing such a significant real-life historical figure for the first time?
Well, I think any actor, I think there's actors here in the audience tonight, any actor would want to work with Christopher Nolan. So for me, it's like, when he calls, he says, Cillian, I've got a part. Yes, I'm always in. But of course, deep down you think, wouldn't it be a dream to be able to play a lead for Chris? That would be just a dream. But you never really articulate that. And it's not like we kind of hang out and go bowling or anything. It's, so I don't have the opportunity to sort of say that to him. But it just, he called me out of the blue, as he always does, or rather Emma called me, because Chris doesn't have a phone, and she passed me the phone, and we talked. So my initial reaction, of course, it was like euphoric, and I was kind of shocked in an amazing way, and said yes immediately, and then, but my instinct was just to go straight to work, and Chris flew over to Ireland then a few days later, maybe a week later. It was kind of COVID time, so it was hard to fly around. Anyway, he did, but in the meantime, I had been just absorbing as much as I could. But it was absolutely thrilling. I knew it was a huge undertaking, but it was, very satisfying.
It was COVID, so I dusted off my Irish passport, which I flew to Dublin.
3 passports he has.
I do, and proud of my Irish one, and went to Dublin, and you sat in my hotel and read the script, and I went to the Hugh Lane Gallery, which is the reconstruction of Francis Bacon's studio. That's very beautiful. And luckily, you seem to like the script, because I'd already asked you if you played the part, and you said yes. Then you read the script.
But that's always the way it goes with you. It's always just, I always know they're going to be phenomenal, but this one was another level. I mean, to read it, and Chris and Emma have this sort of, it's a tradition, I suppose, but the script is always printed on red paper with black ink, with your name kind of across it. So it's really unhelpful to try and read it. And this was a big one, it was really, but I knew this was astonishing because it was, it was written in the first person, which I'd never encountered before. And then the ending was just mind-blowing. And Chris always does magnificent endings, I think, and it's the hardest thing, I think, to get right in script writing. But this one, just the ending, I was just kind of dumbstruck by it.
Yeah, I mean, my process was, I read the book again immediately, and then I put it to one side for a few months, and I spent a lot of time writing notes based on my memory of the book. Sort of the best way to describe it is, what would you tell someone at a dinner party about this book if you were trying to get them to read the book? It was like those things. I made sure I had all of that down before I then reapproached the book and re-examined it. And then as I started to look more and more carefully, there were things I found, and the Lewis Strauss thread was one of them. I mean, it's there in the book, and crucially, what's there in the book is the notion that in his Senate confirmation hearings, it was John F. Kennedy who led the rebellion against him and stopped him being confirmed. And that, to a screenwriter, is just a gift. You're like, okay, that's great. So what I then did is I didn't want to do anything outside of the book. I mean, partly for legal reasons as well. When you're writing a screenplay, you want to feel free. And what freed me was to work within this 700 and however many pages book that has 25 years of research, 25 years of interviews. So it's all in there. The only thing I wanted to do outside of that was go to primary sources. So I went to the 1,000-page transcript of the 1954 security hearings, and I went to the 1,000-page Senate hearings record, and found incredible things there. Some of which were in the book, some of which I just, by going to the book, it then took me to these longer extracts, that I would look at, and found these incredible things, including the testimony of David Hill, played by Rami Malek, who just said the most extraordinary things in front of the whole country, taking on a very, very powerful Washington figure, and therefore very, very indicative of the way that the scientific community pulled together. A lot of them didn't agree with Oppenheimer, a lot of them didn't like Oppenheimer, but they saw what the government did to him, and they all really rallied around, and that was so emblematic of that. And I was thrilled when I finally gave him the script to read. I wasn't able to show it to Marty because he passed away just a week or two before I was going to show them the script. But Kai read the script, and I was thrilled that he immediately said to me, "Oh, who is David Hill? Where did you find that?" And he was impressed that I found something that in their 25 years they hadn't found. But a lot of it really was about this wealth of information that's in the book, an anecdote. It's about what do you not put in, what do you pull out, and then what's left behind. And I just found wonderful, dramatic, inspiring things in that book.
It's kind of my favorite thing when I watch films is watching characters think. Is always trying to see the cogs turning, and I find that fascinating. Characters in reflection, characters in repose, characters between scenes. I love that, and even though there's a lot of dialogue in the script, there was a lot of room for that as well. And then obviously all of the sort of molecular world that Chris had written into the script or seeing that's also a kind of a reflection of what Oppenheimer is experiencing. But I think it was also to do with our working relationship, that I kind of knew that I could do that, and Chris would understand what I was after with that, and I realized that it was going to have to be a quiet performance and a kind of an interior, that it was all happening in here, and he was even at the end in that huge big scene, that interrogation scene at the end, even then he's kind of contained, and then I also knew in the back of my mind that this thing was being shot on IMAX cameras, so I recognized, we never talked about this, but I recognized that it was going to be an 80-foot screen or whatever that eventually you'd be seeing this performance on. So hopefully that you can transmit a lot on that format by just feeling it or thinking it or experiencing it rather than demonstrating it.
It reminds me of a particular scene in the movie I hope you can speak to. I mean, one of the most striking and terrifying scenes in the film is shortly after news of the bombings arrive, and we see Oppenheimer imagining the horrors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki happening to the crowd in the bleachers in front of him. And I'm curious for both of you to talk about that scene, because Chris, because you're evoking something that you've very consciously chosen not to show us, and Cillian, because this moment is such a turning point for the character, where we see the creeping of self-doubt and horror and panic, and yeah, you just both talk about that scene in particular.
Yeah, I mean, when I was writing, I thought long and hard about how to approach everything subjectively, and therefore going into the dropping of the bombs, I was so struck in the book by the fact, this information that I never knew, and it seems so improbable, that Oppenheimer found out about the bombing of Hiroshima the same way the rest of the world found out. He literally just heard about it on the radio from Truman's address. And what that says about how his invention was taken away from him, how, you know, what his part in it was, seems so incredible and striking that I really wanted to try and find a method whereby you could go from the highest high of Trinity, an absolute sense of triumph, to the lowest low as quickly as possible. Just turning that. That's the sort of crux of the film in a way. And I wanted to find a device for that. And I read about this sort of pep rally type atmosphere that had been there. There's a lot of controversy, there's a lot of disagreement with people who were at Los Alamos as to whether they celebrated or whether they worried about the bomb or whether they cried or laughed. And clearly it's all true. And there was everything that Oppenheimer says in that moment, as at various other moments in the film where it was crucially important, everything he says is what he actually said in his address. I didn't feel comfortable inventing any of that, but I felt that this was such a smart person, this has to be, even in the midst of saying that, there's no way that this other sense of it, and this sense of what somebody who had seen a nuclear fire with his own eyes, there's no way he could, to me, think about any of that without visualizing the effect of that on his nearest and dearest, on the world around him, the room he's in at the end in the interrogation scene. That's really the idea behind it. It's like, how could he not constantly be thinking about what that would do to everything around him and personalizing it in that way. So that was really the impulse, and it put a fair amount of pressure on the actor playing the part, because it all plays in this massive close-up. And I don't know if you remember, but the lens was broken that day.
I do remember.
You do remember, okay. I figured you probably would, but I actually, I'm very adaptable to circumstance generally, but literally our IMAX 80mm lens wasn't working and needed servicing. And I knew we had to shoot it in this particular way. I just didn't want to change it. So we shot everything else, and we called one of the pilots who does our aerials, who's in Los Angeles. We were in Los Alamos, and said, I have another IMAX 80mm lens in my desk in my office. If we get it to you, can you fly it? So he literally, had a fixed wing airplane. This is Craig Hosking, who's done all the aerials for all my films. Flew it out, and then we were able to do the close-up last because we got the right lens and got it just in time. And I'm pleased to say when we watch dailies, because what you don't know from the way the scene's edited is everything played in one continuous shot. So the close-up had all of the lighting gags, everything took him through the whole speech, down off the stage, into the crowd. And then of course we cut it all up, but sitting there in dailies watching it, everyone in the room, they'd just never seen anything like it. I mean, the performance is just so involving in that moment. And the format is so, and Hoyter's work, everything's in tune with the performance, being led by the performance. And it's just a very special moment to see that in dailies.
I do remember, it's funny the thing about the lens, I remember that the conversations happening in the background, very intense conversations about how we're going to
Saying, what's wrong? Nothing.
Yeah.
Everything's fine.
And then you hear rumors like someone's flying the lens from Chris's desk to, but we shot that in one day, right? Yeah, and I remember when I read it, it was everything that is in the film is in the script. Every single detail is all written, and I remember recognizing that it was in a huge scene in the movie for the character. But again, I don't think you and I talked about it that much. I think it's sometimes the sort of the themes that you're wrestling with, or what the character's wrestling with, it would almost be silly to try and put language on it, So I remember we just went for it, and I remember all the background artists, they were phenomenally good. Remember, they kept giving it so much and over again. But like those moments, you just have to just be there and kind of let go. It's not intellectual. it's completely instinctual. There's no thinking happening, it's just feeling. That's what it was for me, you know.
I mean, I think the relationship's only changed in that we've gotten closer and more familiar, and the level of trust has gone up. I like to embarrass Cillian with the story of when I sent him the script for Dunkirk, and he called back and said, "Sure, I guess I'll do it, but couldn't I play a Spitfire pilot instead?" And I was like, well, you know, I know it's underwritten. I mean, I've written what I consider to be an experimental script with no character backstories. All this was it was complete opposite to Oppenheimer, really. And so I said, look, I get it. There's not much there, but that's why I need you, and I know that you can help me figure this out on this boat, you know, out on the open ocean. And you know, Cillian, being a loyal friend, said yes, even though I think he thought I was out of my mind or whatever. And turned up and really helped find, particularly that last moment, you know, with Rylance, where, you know, he just pats you on the shoulder or whatever. That all came from Cillian, and that we literally found it out on the open ocean with Barry Keoghan and Mark Rylance, and the, you know, the punchline of the whole thing is, I was then in London in a shop, and I bought the DVD box set of Peaky Blinders because I wanted to show it to my kids. And I looked on the back and it said, Cillian Dunkirk Murphy. I said, okay, it worked out.
I have nothing to add.
It's just stunning to see the actual building of the Los Alamos site in the film, and I'm curious if you could, you know, it's a huge logistical undertaking that can't be spoken about succinctly, but can you, I'm just curious, you know, can you tell us a little bit about just the challenge of that, and Cillian, what it was like just to live in that space, in this remarkable environment where something so important happened?
Yeah, our designer, Ruth de Jong, who did an incredible job. I'd never worked with her before. I met her through Hoyter because she'd worked with him on Jordan Peele's film Nope. And I sort of said to her at the beginning, we have to start with Los Alamos. We need to get out there. We need snow. We need the winter. So you got to build it. And she and her crew, just incredible, an incredible art department. They went out to New Mexico. We found this mesa that Ruth thought was perfect, laid out the stakes and all of that, and then the weather just turned worse and worse, as it does. I mean, the time of year. We went out to check the position of the final buildings as they started to build it, and it was this terrible storm, knocked out all the power. I literally, you know, woke up in my hotel room with no lights, no nothing. You know, I had no idea where I was. It was kind of scary, actually. Waited for the dawn, and then we drove up to the set they'd started to build, and everything was just flat, and all the portaloos had fallen over. There's blue ice everywhere. You know, it was disgusting. But even in those conditions where you could barely drive a stake in the ground, somehow they got it done similar time of year and a similar time frame as the real Los Alamos got built. And so for me and the crew, it was just this great adventure of really starting to relate to what, you know, this tiny taste of what the real Manhattan Project people went through in that incredible environment. But what it meant was we had the exterior of the town and Oppenheimer. There were a couple of interiors. Most of the interiors we did at the real Los Alamos, about 45 minutes away. But Oppenheimer's office was there, a couple other interiors. So it meant we could be there and really kind of live it a bit. You know?
Yeah. It was amazing because that's where we started shooting. Well, we did a couple of pre-shoots with the young Oppenheimer.
Yeah, we did the Cambridge stuff.
Yeah.
I studied your long hair.
That's right.
Yeah.
The 5-hour haircut. I mean, it was an actual 5-hour haircut. But the amazing thing about the shoot was that almost, I think 99% of the whole shoot was on location, real locations. There was no set bills, and I really believe in that. For actors, for performers, I think it really, really adds to what you're trying to convey in terms of truth and honesty and all that stuff. And like, we shot in the real Oppenheimer house in Los Alamos, we shot the real Oppenheimer house in Princeton, we shot in Einstein's office in Princeton also, and the Fuller Lodge, that scene we were just discussing, that was the real Fuller Lodge. So I really believe in that. But just to walk on set on the Los Alamos set, like, Also, I had not packed the appropriate clothing. I thought we were going to the desert, and it was fucking freezing. But amazing to shoot in and to be able to go full 360 on everything. It really felt like you were making a movie. Also, the pace was like the pace was terrific. Like it was 57 days. So we were like we shot that out. I don't know how quickly we shot out Los Alamos, but super.
Yeah, I mean, we were really only there about a week, and having built this set, which for me was frustrating. I'd wanted to do the interiors there as well, but we couldn't afford to, because I was worried about weather, and I wanted to be there longer so we could be opportunistic about how we filmed things. And we had certain needs, certain storms had to come in, and those kind of things. So we were only there a brief period of time, but we miraculously, we got the right weather, and
And through this, you have this, astonishing gallery of actors in this movie who are coming through. And Cillian, you are the hub at the center, and the kind of, in many ways, the center of gravity, around which these many quite dazzling performances are revolving. And so, I want to ask you to speak about working with all of Matt Damon and Josh Hartnett and Benny Safdie and everyone, David Krumholtz, everyone who comes through. But what was it like having to be the one at the center and kind of interacting with everyone, and in different scenes and at different times, and
I mean, it was kind of Chris would casually say, "Oh yeah, I think I've got like Gary Oldman's going to play," and I think Ken Branagh's going to pop in and do a few days. I was like, "Holy shitballs!" Like that's like I've got to turn up at the and so. But it was also so exhilarating because it was a tough shoot, like, and it was intense and like. For Chris and for me, with the pace of it and the stuff that we were dealing with, and the kind of page count per day was pretty high. But then to know that these extraordinary actors were coming in, and like Emily Blunt and Matt Damon, all of them, the best actors in the world, But I think it was brilliantly cast because they're all people of consequence, and they're not composite characters. They all existed, and they're all significant characters in history and in Oppenheimer's story. So you needed actors of consequence, for those parts. And then for all the other scientists roles as well, all those actors that came in, they had all done such incredible amount of research on each of their characters. And the few times that we were kind of like, we needed to kind of, Chris needed us to kind of extemporize or improvise, like they all knew everything about their position as a character. So that was just
as did the extras.
Yeah.
Because we had real scientists. When we were in Los Alamos, you'd have a room full of people who actually worked at the laboratory there now. They all knew this history. So you'd say, okay, when Cillian's coming in the back of that meeting, you remember I was just saying, okay, we need you to talk for a bit longer, and they started throwing things out there. Really a wonderfully educated, and some of the guys at the GEC meeting were right at the table with you, we got to talking to them halfway through the day and realized they knew way more about it than we did. So it keeps you on your toes. A quick shout out to John Papsadero who cast the film. Because the depth of the cast, the ensemble we put together. I've worked with John since Memento, actually, a very long time. But this is, he just found amazing actors for every little part. It's really phenomenal work.
Chris, I'll end with this. Oppenheimer is not the first film of yours to be described as an improbable triumph, and to the point where it raises the question of, isn't it actually quite probable at this point? But but I understand why people say that, because a talky, densely structured 3-hour film on this subject matter, and I'm just wondering, as you're setting out, the challenge that this movie represents, or might represent to the audience, and it's thrilling to see that the audience has embraced that challenge. And did you have faith that they would meet you more than halfway, or
Well, Emma and I, when we're figuring out what the package is, how we're going to the studio, what we're asking for, we try to sort of figure out a worst case scenario, best case scenario, kind of, and budget accordingly. So this film was made cheaper than Emma's an incredible producer. She's the best producer in the business. The film was made cheaper than anybody else could, but still, cost a fair amount of money. And we were betting on a reasonable degree of success. the truth is there was no precedent to suggest this kind of success at all. So no, it took us all massively by surprise, and we're hugely grateful for it, particularly to find so many young people coming to the movie. You know, I went down to the Chinese theater towards the end of the summer when we'd already been playing for several weeks, because they had installed a film projector especially for us to play the IMAX film. And I went down Emma and I went on a Thursday afternoon at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, snuck in the back, and it was completely full. I'd never even seen that in the theater full, you know, all the times I've been going there. So no, the success of the film has been astonishing to us. Yeah, I mean, phenomenal.
And again, richly deserved. Congratulations to you both.
And that's it for the video, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe, help support the channel, and stay tuned for the next one. If you like that one, you should check out this panel for Honora with Oscar winners Sean Baker and Mikey Madison. See you next time.